But the tight-knit nature of Southern Italian families and their inherent mistrust of authority made crime in Little Italy that much more difficult to combat.
When Italian Americans were the victims of crimes, they didn't think for a second of going to the police because they thought that could only make it worse. Anybody who was in any position of authority was generally the enemy.
Nobody wants to talk because they're afraid. The police department really was mostly Irish then. They didn't speak Italian. It was an immigrant neighborhood. Nobody wanted to even go in there.
But there was one man on the force willing to help these new immigrants. His name was Giuseppe Petrosino. Petrosino was an Italian immigrant himself, born in the village of Padula in 1860. After his emigration, he joined the police force and worked his way up to detective sergeant.
Giuseppe Petrosino, today most people don't even know his name, but he was probably the most famous crime fighter of the turn of the century. I think it bothered Petrosino enormously that it was Italians preying on fellow Italians. And he wanted desperately to get rid of the bad elements so that Italian Americans could prosper.
In 1905, Petrosino assembled a team of 4 other Italian cops known as the Italian Squad. Often working in disguise and using their knowledge of multiple Italian dialects, they wormed their way into backroom parlors where Black Hand gangs plotted. Petrosino made hundreds of arrests and deported numerous gang members back to Italy. But his ultimate goal was to help Italians break out of their enclave by learning to trust outsiders.
My great uncle, he said to somebody in front of police headquarters, the guy said, why do you do this? And he said, well, who's going to protect our people? Who's going to get them out of this, ghetto area and get them into society? And as long as the Black Hand was around blowing people up, they didn't have much of a chance.
Despite the risks involved with speaking out, Giovanna decided to ask Petrosino for help.
My great-grandmother went to Petrosino in an attempt to try and find the people who had bombed their store. Shortly after she starts working for him, that's when Petrosino is sent to Italy.
On February 9th, 1909, Petrosino traveled to Italy to investigate potential bombing suspects. A month later, he was dead, shot on a street corner in Palermo, Sicily. In New York, over 250,000 people lined the streets to mourn him. With Petrosino's death, Italian Americans had lost a willing ally to help lift them out of their ghetto. For Giovanna, his death was devastating.
You can imagine the abject hopelessness of ever getting any justice. Now, everything is gone for her. Her store is gone. The one person that she had put hope into is murdered, and they're still after the family. And it's only a few months later that their daughter, my grandmother, is kidnapped.
Why don't you just tell me, how did Big Nanny get to America?
When I was in my early 30s, I finally got my grandmother to talk to me. 80 years later, my grandmother still believed that these people could hurt our family.
I don't tell nobody. I'm never going to tell my friends. I don't want them to know because you shouldn't tell. That's the way it is.
The day after her 4th birthday in 1909, Angelina was abducted from her apartment by a Black Hand gang member.
I was only a little girl, so I went with them.
She goes with the kidnappers and gets on the train and realizes very quickly that she's going over the river. And she starts screaming and crying and saying, "Take me home." And he rips her hand and tells her to shut up or he'll hurt her.